Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9. We're bringing you stories from the world of business policy and economy. First up, an RBI appointed panel on Monday has recommended a host of customer-centric initiatives for banks, including online settlement of claims, flexibility in submission of live certificates for pensioners by a centralized KVC database, among others. Also on the show, Go First has apprised DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, the regulator for civil aviation, of being capable of operating 152 daily flights as soon as it resumes operations. And the government is working on a PLI, production and performance-linked incentive scheme worth as much as 15,000 crore to encourage the setting up of grid-scale battery storage in India. And also, HDFC Bank on Monday suspended a senior executive after a video of the employee abusing his colleague during an online meeting went viral on social media. We are also tracking Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference WWDC 2023, which was held on Monday late night. According to India time, the tech giant launched a 15-inch MacBook Air, Mac Studio, Mac Pro powered by M2 chipset. But the highlight of the event was Apple's revolutionary AR headset, Vision Pro. All of that and more on this bulletin. With me at this point in time in the studio is my colleague Amit Ranjan. Also joining me is my colleague all the way from Kolkata is Mr. Ghoshal, and Abhijit Ghoshal is here with us. Gentlemen, appreciate you both taking time out. Amit, I want to come to you first. Interesting recommendation by RBI panel. Essentially, if I were to sum it up, telling the banks that you must make it easy for your customers.
Exactly. The operative phrase is make it easy. So like you said, online settlement claims for the heirs of the deceased have been recommended. Submission of certificates by pensioners, there's a flexibility that needs to be added on that. That's been a know your customer database, centralized database has been recommended. For people who have lost their documents, the panel has suggested that free of cost, people from the banks will help them get new copies of these certificates. Right. So at their own cost, so it will be free to the customer. Okay. And also there will be a system where complainants can track the processing of their grievances and complaints as they are going through. So these are some of the big recommendations that have been put forward. And again, I will come back to what you said, make it easy. Make it easy.
Abhijit, interesting recommendations there. Let me quickly, for the benefit of our viewers, apprise them that the panel was set up on 23rd of May 2022 under the chairmanship of former Deputy Governor BP Kanungo. Essentially, the expert panel has now proposed a list of recommendations in line with what banks can do to make customers' lives easy, Abhijit.
Yeah, good morning, Shweta. I don't think the RBI or any other authority has in the past, in a single stroke, recommended so many steps that will make life easy for the customers. I mean, each of them, the absence of each of them have proved to be of great harassment. Let me list you a few examples. Now, I can give you an example from a very close person I know very closely. He had an app of the largest banker in the country. Now, suddenly he has 2 or 3 accounts linked to that app. Now, believe me, suddenly one day, after, the account has been in existence for the last 50 years and has been passed down from his parents to him. So suddenly, this account just goes off from his app. I could see him, the panic that he was in. He rushed to the bank. He, in fact, took leave from the office, rushed to the bank, only to be told that you are supposed to renew your KYC. He said, what the hell? I mean, this account has been in operation in this very bank, in this very address. And for more than 50 years, my parents used to operate it and now operate it with my wife. And I have submitted KYC a few years ago. So what's the problem? He said, no, periodically it has to be submitted. And this is a must. And unless you submit the KYC afresh, this account is not going live. So just imagine the amount of harassment that it can, make to customers. That's incredible. So if that one goes, there is nothing like, like it to make the life of a customer easier. Then also take the instance of pensioners. You and I all know that pensioners around the country, they're all senior people. Some of them are super senior citizens. They have, and some of them have actually none to fall back on, and they have to trudge to the bank, which is where their account is linked and which is not definitely the closest bank to their residence. And believe me, in this summer or even in winter, as the case might be in different parts of the country, they actually have to undertake a lot of pain, stand in the queues, submit life certificate, and one can actually endanger his or her own life by going to submit a life certificate in this heat. So, submitting life certificate in the nearest branch will also be of great help. And believe me, those who are infirm or are really suffering from different ailments and have nobody to perhaps lay his lay his head on his shoulder, he or she, how can he go and stand in a queue and then again travel quite a lot of distance? So that will again help a lot of people. Another point which I think we didn't mention so far is that the Apex Bank has said, if you have pledged a collateral and taken a loan, and if once the loan has been repaid, and if the collateral is not released in time, the bank in question has to pay a penalty. Okay. Now, this I think is a very, very important step, because all of us know that banks often, take time to release assets which have been held as collaterals. This can be true for real estate. This can be true for gold loans. This can be true for many things. So this is another very important, improvement that the central bank has recommended. And also, I think there are other heirs inheriting their parents' accounts and other financial instruments. Now, most of us today, we travel outside, out of the state at least, if not out of the country. And if you have to take leave from everywhere and come back running to claim proper legal inheritances, that actually makes life very, very difficult. Now, so all of these actually go to help the service of banks. Another thing I forgot to mention is that mis-selling of insurance, mutual funds, etc. by banks. This is something all of us have faced. Whenever you step into a bank today, thank God it's not that frequent like earlier years, but you will be accosted. I'm using the word accosted almost deliberately, because I know of people who have faced very persistent salesmen from the banks who are out there to get their increment and promotion, whatever is linked, or incentive linked to the amount of insurance or the amount of MFs that they can sell to unsuspecting customers who might be stepping in the bank premises. So This is another which the RBI has said auditors must take into account while reviewing the performance of banks. So I think all these will actually make life a lot easier.
Do you know what stands apart for me, Amit, is also a very interesting takeaway that is coming out of the panel. That is, customer-facing staff and officers should undergo mandatory soft skill training. So what the panel is also recommending here essentially is that you should know how to treat your customers when they come into the bank. The idea that customer is the king, that has so far been only experienced or put into practice in retail, is now hopefully will also be put into practice in public sector banking, which is where a lot of people say we are harassed quite a bit, and not many people listen to us, and we're not really spoken to very, very nicely. So the reason why a lot of people go for private banking as opposed to public banking is because you don't get the experience that you want in public sector banks. And this could change that if at all implemented.
Yeah, it's good that the RBI has recognized that the problem is not restricted to numbers and certificates. It is a human problem, and that needs to be addressed, and that is what they're addressing. So that's a step, a new step, and a step in a very good direction actually. It could basically take off on other things that banks will recognize in their other services that they're offering to customers.
Absolutely. Abhijit, I think very interesting there, the training in soft skills, because as I mentioned, so far you only experience, niceties in private banking, and with public banking, I think one of the problems that everybody, irrespective of their age and who they are, continue to face is that it's not easy to bank with, let's say, an RBI or a PNB, if I may name them, as opposed to an HDFC, where you're going to be treated better.
Shweta, absolutely correct. Though we, later in the show, perhaps, as you said, we will be mentioning one of the, misdemeanors of an HDFC manager, actually. So, yeah, HDFC or ICICI or Axis or whatever, Kotak Mahindra, you actually step into a private bank, you will get a completely different experience. And that brings me to another point, Shweta. This is very important in the semi-urban and rural branches. Believe me, especially people in the rural branches, they are, they think that they will be beholden to the bank if they get the minimum service and the minimum courtesy. The amount of mistreatment is far greater in the rural branches than in the cities. Unfortunately, the media is more or less focused in the cities, so the rural population actually remains without a voice. And it will be of great help if the RBI actually implements such steps that the rural folk who actually travels a lot to go to their bank,
right,
for all the essential services, as you know, the online services that we resort to frequently here in cities, they are by and large absent in the rural areas. So that poor guy has to trudge to the bank to get his service done. And there, in fact, the number of people that is serviced by a particular branch is far higher than in the cities. And these poor people actually wait for hours and they get treated badly. So if the soft skills improve, if they can handle, I can understand there is also a lot of pressure on the people, who are at the customer interface at the banks, especially the PSUs. But then again, you cannot really take the customer for granted, and it has to improve, especially in the semi-urban and rural branches. Let me tell you, in the cities, there is a lot of media pressure. There is a lot of pressure, as you will, you mentioned in the HDFC staff. He actually got suspended due to a misdemeanor. So these sort of checks and balances, the people are more voiced as opposed to the voiceless guys in the rural areas. So I think the services, this problem is accentuated in the rural areas more, and the RBI has to actually step up the vigil, perhaps.
Right, and RBI seems to be stepping up there. Krishna Kumar joining us. Krishna, very briefly, good morning. We discussed extensively RBI panel's guidelines on how banks should be treating their customers. A series of recommendations made there. What, according to you, stands out?
Well, the fact that the banks which are not returning borrowers' documents even after the closure of the loan account and penalizing them, that really stood out for me because that really was, in my opinion, a signal from RBI to banks to buck up and treat customers better, especially in the kind of economic environment that we live in today, what we've been through during the pandemic, the importance of people's savings, the importance of people's money, and the importance of quick, fast, and easy banking. This has been taken up by the RBI seriously, as you've been rightly telling everybody that the committee for this was set up about a year ago. They've come out with their final recommendations, strong recommendations. I'll be eager to see how big banks, both public sector and private sector, start implementing some of these things, like the ones you were just discussing, how to train the banking employees, the staff over there to deal with customers, because there's so many untoward incidents at the bank offices that have been seen. The RBI taking cognizance of that, and RBI also taking cognizance of any lacks or from the bank side when it comes to returning, borrowers, loan documents, property documents, to anything. So there is clearly, as we've been talking about, a customer-first approach that the RBI is subscribing to, is telling the banks. But I'm just hoping how soon and how well will the banks implement these suggestions.
All right, that is of course a very interesting story there. Recommendations made by RBI panel, we're going to come to that, but we also very briefly touched upon the HDFC Bank and the controversy that happened yesterday where a senior executive was let go of or suspended after a video of him shouting on one of his colleagues went viral. Remember, he was not a customer, but a colleague within the sales team is what we're given to understand. From my limited understanding of Bengali, Avijit, I am told that a lot of expletives were hurled in that meeting, the video that we all saw, after which HDFC Bank woke up and has taken, some sort of measures to curb it. But I don't think it's going to put an end to the menace, because it is a culture within the sales team. A lot of banks, a lot of places where sales team, when not met with their target, are often harassed and treated the way we saw in that video.
Shweta, absolutely. I'll also add, it didn't begin there. It's not going to end there. And why single out the banks only? It happens almost in all sales forces in this hapless country. The employees are just picked up, they are hauled up badly, all sorts of expletives are used. I am not saying that all bosses, all team leaders use it, but under the sort of pressure that companies actually put their sales teams in, this is, I am sorry to say, a very common practice. And banks shouldn't be singled out. It happens in banks, it happens in insurances, happens in mutual funds, and not only in services, in all sorts of products. Whenever the selling function is involved, whenever there is a target, this sort of practice happens almost everywhere. Obviously, the personality factor does make a difference, right? So that definitely from boss to boss, from team leader to team leader, it actually makes a difference. But then again, we are all working under the same paradigm. There is no paradigm shift as long as you are selling and as long as you have a stiff target to comply with.
All right, Krishna, you remember we were discussing this story yesterday where on the surface it seemed relatively funny the way the video went out, but once we understood what was being said, it became dark and it became personal, to the point, I think, where we joked, thank God we are not in sales and thank God we are not in that team.
Oh, absolutely. But the point is that the message was larger, not just for the banking sector or in sales departments or anything of that sort. The larger message was about toxic workplaces. There was a recent survey that said that 86% of employees in India, according to a recent survey, are looking to resign from their jobs in the next 6 months. And a huge majority of them are resigning because of toxic bosses, toxic workplace culture. And that's across sectors, that's across functions in sectors. So, the larger message that story came out, is that that's going to be the end of that. Not only will you, if you are that toxic boss setting that toxic work culture, you will get fired immediately. That's a great lesson that people are learning, especially with that particular instance. And I'm hoping that will be the way forward for all toxic bosses. But also the fact that you're talking about a change in expectations from workplace post-pandemic. You're talking about people just coming back to office and still demanding hybrid work models where half a week at home, half a week work from home, half a week at the office. People are very still in two minds about how they're going to split time between the office and other things in their life. And at a time like that, there is absolutely no space for toxic bosses, that kind of behavior. That's the kind of behavior that kids are taught not to do when they go to school. And here you have somebody who I'm sure has kids who go to school behaving like in a manner that is unbecoming of, not just a corporate professional, but of a human being.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to also point out, Amit, the only reason we saw that this is happening, this has been happening. There is evidence, ample proof. People often talk about toxic work culture, but the only reason we got to see it is because there is a physical evidence to it. Somebody dared to put that video out exposing the culture, not the person, because this is a culture-specific problem, not a person-specific problem. One way or the other, you have people around who feel that they can do it and get away with it, hence they continue to do it. But HDFC Bank there, making sure that you penalize such, people so as to not let this sort of culture prosper, not help it grow, and straight up give a message to everybody, to every employee working in an organization, that this is not okay.
And what is not okay, which is not a good practice, but I hope there is no internal inquiry at HDFC to find out who put that video out.
That is interesting.
And I hope that doesn't happen. Though that is not a good practice. What stays in a company should stay within a company. There are departments who take care of dealing with toxic bosses and removing toxic work cultures. But that is the other side of it, and I hope it doesn't happen. You said that somebody put the video evidence out. I hope he or she is not penalized.
Okay, I think Krishna wants to come in at this point.
Right. Yeah, I agree with Amit when he says it's interesting how that this video even got out. But that's what whistleblowing is all about. Whistleblowing, when you whistleblow, you're doing something wrong according to company's legal policy. That's what happens. So except that, if there is no mechanism for whistleblowers, if there is no place for whistleblowers to approach to, these days social media seems to be the favorite place where everybody is whistleblowing. I'm not really sure. I think it's a gray area over there. But what I'm also hoping, as Amit was talking about, the person who was a whistleblower, is given protection, and also this sort of encourages more people to come forward. Shweta, if you remember, we've seen these kind of videos happening in the edtech sector. We've had those videos for when the edtech sector was in a breakneck speed of growth. You had so many of these videos releasing about how these managers, were driving people for sales, in an inhuman way. My other question is this. Pushpal Roy is the boss, is the person that we're talking about, the one person that we're talking about, where he's being demonized. But what about that person's boss? What about that person's boss?
Exactly.
Where does this chain begin? I think that's an interesting point to ponder upon as we discuss, how we can protect whistleblowers.
Absolutely, and as I mentioned, this is not a person-specific problem. This is a culture-specific problem where you penalize not an individual, but you penalize that culture, where you can get away with saying whatever you want to say to a junior, and in fact be even rewarded later if your performance meets the expected target. So essentially, I think a good step there by HDFC Bank, and of course, hopefully other other organization, other workplace will also take some cue from it and crack down on toxic work culture. The essential debate here, the essential argument being that toxic work culture is absolutely a no-no. But we're going to move on now to another important story that we're tracking, and that is government is working on a PLI scheme, that is production linked incentive scheme, worth as much as 15,000 crore to encourage setting up of grid scale battery storage. Krishna, this is an important story. This essentially goes on to highlight how important is India's bid to get those batteries in place, and we are going to spend as much as we can, but ensure that there is more participation from private sector.
Right. This is the answer to the question we've been asking. If India wants to become an EV manufacturing hub, an electric vehicle, manufacturing hub, where is it going to get the batteries? Because you'll have to import all batteries at this stage from China and Taiwan and elsewhere. So now is a good time for India to also simultaneously develop its battery making capacity, or batteries of all kinds. I mean, I'm not talking about just batteries which power, electric cars and electric bikes. We're talking about all kinds of batteries that we will be needing. And this, in a sense, is great backward integration, if you ask me, from India's side. Even as the flashy EV cars, electric cars and electric bikes, and all the headline grabbing stuff happens with the front end of it. This is the back end of it, the battery making end of it. And look at the amount of it, about 15,000 crore rupees worth of profit linked initiatives for the grid scale battery store, to encourage grid scale battery storage. It can store renewable energy and release it during high demand. And that's what we're looking at going forward. So in that sense, Shweta, without beating around the bush, this is the right step to take if India wants to lead the way when it comes to renewable energy, which it is. In the world, when it comes to its own solar panels, wind energy, turbo energy, in all kinds of renewable energy sectors. India has been making great progress, led by the south of India, states in South India, especially Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala have been doing great work when it comes to renewable energy. So India is a leader when it comes to implementing renewable energy policies, and this is a furtherment of that, Shweta.
Krishna, if I may come in, Krishna, sometime back we had touched upon this story, and the PLIs, we had touched upon the idea that government does not have unlimited funds to basically put PLIs everywhere. Do you think the government in promoting electric mobility has identified just the right place to put the money in to basically give a thrust to electric mobility in India in batteries and not other basically vehicles or engines or whatever? Do you think it has just touched the right thing?
Because every time the PLI was discussed when it comes to electric vehicle making, Amit, the question was that are these people using it, and it was taken away, and now you're saying that because of it being taken away, the prices of electric vehicles are going to go up, and also at the end of the day, you're going to give them all the money, and they're going to take all that money and buy batteries from China, buy batteries from Taiwan, buy batteries from the rest of the world. So clearly, instead of putting money into the hands of the EV makers, electric vehicle makers, so that they can use that money to buy batteries from abroad, India is now taking this one step back and then making the batteries itself, so that like the SOPs that the electric vehicle makers need will be lesser, because we have a 15,000 crore rupee worth of profit-linked initiatives for people to set up battery making facilities. Any battery that you ever want in the world will be available right here in India. So I think that's the plan here, Amit.
All right, and I also want to quickly touch upon, how this scheme is going to be different from the existing Advanced Chemistry Cell ACC PLI scheme, because the government here is also hoping that the two of them do not overlap at this point, Krishna.
Right. When it comes to policy making, we're at a very early stage, Shweta, so I don't want to get into too much of the details of it all, but what people need to know while listening to the discussion is really simple. India has last year was a watershed year for electric vehicle sales in the country, be it electric cars or electric bikes, and India simultaneously has been long on setting up its electric vehicle manufacturing capacity. You have Ola setting up the world's largest electric scooter making facility in Krishnagiri in Tamil Nadu, and then
All right, it seems that we've lost Krishna at this point. Abhijit, I want to come to you with this question. India has a very ambitious target of 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030, and this PLI scheme seems to be another step in that direction, in the direction of achieving that target.
Yeah, absolutely. See, selling electric vehicles without the battery is like selling the cart without the horse. Both have to come together. Now, in EVs, it's very clear that the battery is the most critical part. It's almost like the engine of the normal petrol or diesel-driven cars. So, unless you have it, have a steady, dependable supply, and where you also have the predictable pricing, system, then without that, the EV industry cannot flourish. So it's extremely important that we have a very domestic, stable and dependable supply of batteries that will, remove the necessity of, depending upon countries like China for the supply of these. Just look at what happened in the semiconductor chips, or is still happening. I mean, a factory in Malaysia or Indonesia goes down, and you have your entire vehicle manufacturing supply chain disrupted. So if you have these critical components manufactured in your country, obviously it makes your downstream industries immune from such shocks. That one. And secondly, you also generate a lot of employment. Very simple. And thirdly, which is the most important part, the country also progresses towards a greener and better future. So you actually earn a lot of brownie points on a lot of fronts.
All right, absolutely. All right, that is an important story. We will come back on that, but shifting focus now to Go First, which has apprised DGCA that it is now able to operate 152 daily flights. This seems for the very first time, some sort of commitment there coming in from Go First after it went under ceased operation or temporarily halted them in the month of May. Been more than a month now, approximately a month and 3 days. It was 3rd of May, if my memory recalls that correctly, Abhijit. It seems that Go First is saying that we have now our house in order and we will go back to air very, very soon.
Yeah, obviously that's one of the respites that the average flying passenger is looking for. And look at what's happened to the ticket, the tariff. I mean, the fares have risen, actually have hit the sky. So the sooner it comes back to operation, the better. But I really think the real crux will be arranging that 200 or 250 odd crores that it has been seeking from its lenders, because it needs an immediate injection of this cash to start operations. There are a lot of creditors, including unpaid employees. The employees have to be paid. This cash has to be first used in paying salaries of about, I think, about 700 to 800 employees, including pilots, including ground staff, including engineers. They have to be paid off. The companies that sold them fuel, aviation fuel, they have to be paid, and there has to be an arrangement of steady supply of fuel. I mean, otherwise, this proposal will remain on paper. So that's very important. Securing the financing, I think it's mentioned around 250 crores or 200 crores. That is very important, and the entire plan will rest on how quickly Go First can actually secure that funding. I think that's the moot point here. But obviously, if it can again spread its wings, the people to benefit the most, apart from definitely the employees, will be the average flyer in the Indian skies. Just look at the fares, I'm telling you again. Shweta.
All right. So this is a story of an airline which is currently under insolvency at this point, Amit, and they have huge debt on their books. I think according to the latest figures that are out, the airline needs to an upward of 200 crore rupees to resume flights. This is what the resolution professional has come on record to say, that this is the money we need to start operating. But the latest that we have is that they are okay to operate because they have access to 400 crore worth of government's emergency credit line. So they have enough money at their disposal to start operating. However, the debt is extremely high, and as Abhijit pointed out, it is owed to not just the lessors but also to the employees who've been working there without pay for approximately a month and a half, and to all the other people. They've got to pay them first, but before they start resuming their operation.
Yeah, okay. The 200, despite the government credit line emergency scheme of 400 crores, the Go First is still in talks with lenders to get that 200 crores. So that is the last resort.
Okay.
They want. The 200 crores, like you rightly mentioned, will go partly into the April and May salaries of the employees. They need to kickstart the operations of 26 planes, 675 pilots, 1,300 crew members. They need a minimum of 200 crores, including May and April salaries. Coming to the exact numbers, they have a total debt of a whopping 11,400 crores, out of which financial creditors alone account for 6,520 crores of that debt. In April, the Wadia Group had infused 250 crores into the airline, but obviously that has not been enough, because that is around the time that it stopped operations. So these are the kind of numbers we are looking at. The government emergency credit line guarantee scheme is the last resort.
Right.
So they are not going in for that right now. They are in discussions with creditors for that magic number of 200 crores that they need to kickstart operations of the airline right now.
Okay, so but they have options on the table, which is interesting, Krishna. They have options on the table. 200 crores is what they need in the interim to start operating, to go back to skies with a aircraft crew of approximately 22 planes, and the crew that they have so far. They haven't let go of any employees, because that was one of the clause that was put in when they went into bankruptcy that they're not supposed to let go of any existing employees with the existing staff, to pay the existing staff, to get its house in order. It needs 200 crores. It has that money that can come by the way of government's emergency line. But as Amit pointed out, that could be the last resort. But some good news there, some positive development there for people at large, that Go First could come back soon. And it is in everybody's interest for Go Back to take to skies.
Vijay, I totally agree with you. I mean, look at the fares. That's all we can say. Look at the airfares right now. Any sector, any route, doesn't really matter. They're all inflated. Go First. We need another airline in the skies, and Go First. All of this is very heartening news. And what's also heartening here is, Shweta, how they started out this entire process of rebooting themselves. Instead of just throwing in the towel, it seemed like when they went in for bankruptcy, it looked like they're throwing the towel. But the fact of the matter is that they were going back to the basics, going back to the drawing board to do this right. And all through it, as you rightly pointed out, they've held back their employees, they've held back their aircraft. You're looking at a fleet of 22 aircraft. And a fleet of 22 aircraft is no small fleet, by the way, Shweta. We've seen aircraft with smaller fleet than this operating. So 22 aircraft fleet for Go First to start with is a good number, and they've held on to the staff, which is also very good. They're sort of setting lessons for how to operate in the aviation space, civil aviation space, Shweta, from the looks of it all, because it's a very difficult space. It's been through absolute hell and back, during the pandemic. And as it's starting its recovery, how do companies need to go about, especially with the kind of vagaries you see in aviation turbine fuel and the general operational costs of operating an airline in today's day and age, and how to manage it when the times get tough and not go the kingfisher way, if I may, Shweta.
Okay, and remember, this is a sector where margins are extremely thin, profits come very, very rarely. To operate in such a climate, I think you have to give it to Go First for rebounding that quickly. And if I may say so, rebounding that, it is rebounding. It seems like it will come back now that it's sent out a proposal for the very first time to DGCA.
You mentioned thin margins. Let me just add, it requires 12 crores per day to run 26 aircrafts. Just Go First.
Crores.
So it's that expensive an industry.
Absolutely, a very, very expensive industry. And before I let you all go, very interestingly, we also want to touch upon Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference that happened late night for us here in India, where the tech giant not just launched a 15-inch MacBook Air. I think the trendsetter, the highlight of the event, Krishna, was Apple's revolutionary AR headset, Vision Pro. It seems like Apple is finally playing some catch up with the development in the AR VR space, especially with Snapchat already taking the lead. But Vision Pro there, not just very, very extremely expensive device, but also going to be the hottest trendsetter at least this quarter.
Well, it's not about this quarter. Believe me, it's going to hit stores in 2024. First of all, yes, it's going to be debated about a lot in this quarter and what it's going to do. And for once, you have such a positive response to a brand new Apple product, although it's not the first one to make the product in that space. People have, generally the reactions have been positive, even from non-Apple fans. Yes, the costs is being made fun of, but that's to do with nearly everything that Apple launches. When Apple launched its big, headsets, the Apple Pro Max, that was 60,000 rupees in Indian money. So let's forget the cost for a bit. But what is the potential over here for Apple to do is that take this product and make it mainstream. Take it away from the tech geeks and the people who understand VR and AR, and just turn around and say, you don't need a tablet, you don't need a computer, you don't need a phone, you need only this. Because with this, you can sit where you are, take an app, play with the app, watch a movie, play a game, travel somewhere, and then come back and continue life as it is. So I think Apple might have just arrived at its completely all-encompassing, all-in-one device of the future.
Okay.
Today, $3,499 is a huge sum of money for a toy. But let's remember, Shweta, once upon a time, the tablet was considered a toy. Like the tablet was not a necessity. They kept asking, why do you need a tablet? Why do you need two sizes of tablets, mini tablet, big tablet? Now everybody wants a tablet in a size and in a dimension that they want. Now tablet has become a necessity.
Right.
Today, once upon a time, even the phone was not a necessity. A phone that plays music was not a necessity. A phone that takes videos was not a necessity. But today, all of them are. So I suspect, yes, Apple is not the first mover. Apple was not the first mover even when it comes to a touch phone. The iPhone was not the first touch phone that there ever was. It
Right.
wasn't the first, in the world. So similarly, this VR and AR headset from Apple, which is not the first in the space, probably the latest entrant, the last entrant possibly into the space, whereas everybody is part of it already, it could yet turn the tide for VR and AR and make it mainstream, make it accessible, make it something that is meant for people who are not tech geeks, Shweta.
All right, and that with that, I think Apple concludes its grand vision for what's to come in the AR VR space. Extremely expensive, not just a toy, Amit. A toy doesn't cost you an upward of 3 lakh rupees.
It has gone years and years into the making and development. The good thing about this is there were similar devices. It does not put the user into a retreat of isolation. You can see the eyes of the user while he is using it. He does not have to act like a blind man to walk around his house. He can do all of that while using this. The downside is, if I may, that while this market capitalization of Apple came in the breathing distances of 3 trillion, after the announcement yesterday, their stocks fell in Wall Street. So that is they may rise up again. But the anticipation is probably the price is too high. That is why they're expecting that the sales may not be that much. But that is the downside. But it is a path-breaking device, no question.
Absolutely. Path-breaking device there coming from Apple's kitty for all the AR, VR lovers. Extremely expensive, upward of some 3 lakh rupees if we are to convert that into rupee. But a grand mega launch by Apple finally in the AR, VR space, as Krishna pointed out. Apple may not be the trendsetter in this space, but once Apple puts out a device in the public arena, it is likely to capture imagination of all people who get their hands on it. We will, of course, keep tracking all those details right here on Newsline. Thanks very much for watching.